Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today.
Thank
Um,
you.
Maybe you can just kick off with a brief introduction to this wonderful short film, Gorka. What can people expect when they watch it?
So I got the script, and I get occasional scripts sent through to me, and quite a lot of the time they're terrible. And the main thing I thought about this is it really wasn't. It was funny and it was human, and it was as a short film, it felt like a mini movie, which short films quite often aren't. They're often slices of life or just a mood, and this actually felt to me like Joe had managed to condense a sort of quite British idea of a family tragicomic little incident into a mini movie, which I really liked. It wasn't a massive stretch for me to play a grumpy old sort of late middle-aged Jewish man, so I like that too. Yeah, so really, it's a movie about a sort of very normal thing that people might have to go through, although quite a big thing, which is a death in the family. But what Joe did, which is clever and funny, is he put someone there who isn't meant to be there, which is not my character. It's a French exchange student who his son couldn't leave back in London, and so this very particular family incident is kind of refracted through the lens of Gorka, who doesn't really speak English and who is a sweet boy, but is trying to make sense of it. And it's much too much for him emotionally, but he actually does like deals with it in a really endearing way. And that's what the movie is.
And I was reading that sort of Joe did get the inspiration from kind of a real life incident, sort of slightly different setup with his grandma. But was it quite great as well for it to be based on something that was real? And what discussions might have you had with Joe to kind of understand where he was coming from and sort of, an outsider, I guess, being present at this very, very personal moment that a family's going.
Actually, I mean, one of the things that was really good about it, we had about 3 days to film it. Yeah, we filmed it in Bognor, and certainly for me, which was good for me, Joe let me do a lot of improvising, and so quite a lot of my lines they're based on lines that Joe wrote, but then he said just do whatever, and we filmed all of that, and most of that is actually in the film. So actually, I think how it opens with me complaining, or my character Morris complaining about the fact that I'm going to my wife's father's deathbed, but I felt he's never liked me because he's an anti-Semite and whatever. I think most of that was improvised from a script that he had already said, which is that clearly there's tension in the family. I mean, that's set up very, very quickly, that there's kind of tension in the family. It's not a simple situation of deathbed, which we're often encouraged in a Hollywood sense for it to be very moving in a kind of like white curtained words of wisdom goodbye kind of way. It's very not that. It's kind of Bogner and kind of slightly grim, and there's a lot of tension in the family, and you find out very quickly it's very economical filmmaking, that his wife, Morris's wife, mum figure, who's played by Geraldine Somerville, you find out very quickly that she didn't have a very good relationship with her father. So there's all these sort of fractured relationships going on in the short film, and it's very economical storytelling, which is one thing I noticed when I read the script, actually. And I think that maybe comes from, to answer your question, from the fact that it's based on a real incident. So he had all the sort of backlog of truth to go with. He's not starting from scratch. He knows how this stuff plays out.
And I think that is the amazing thing about the film. It's a microcosm. Like you really feel like there's a world beyond that. Like you've watched a bigger film and you're kind of really invested in these characters. And I guess part of that is that they feel very lived in, and those relationships do as well. So did you have some time to rehearse with Geraldine, and also with Yanis, who plays it, the exchange student so well? How did you all work together to kind of pull that off?
We didn't have any time to rehearse. I mean, it's a low budget British short. And I vaguely remember, because it was sort of 18 months ago now, that we actually filmed it, that I just turned up in Bognor at this hotel and met the rest of the cast. And we did have, I mean, there's quite, as there is with any filmmaking, there's got a lot of sitting around. And in the sitting around, me and Geraldine became friends, actually. She's a really lovely woman. And we did quite a lot of chatting about how that marriage might be actually like. She's a brilliant actress. She's quite well known for being another mother, which is Harry Potter's mother, which is, I think, a different relationship to the one between her and Morris in the film. Actually, the main thing was that within the time that we had, which was about 3 days, a combination of the cast getting on, which I think we all did, and Joe setting the kind of mise en scene very well, particularly that house, actually. That house, which is really well chosen by him and the location scout, felt very like a particular type of quite grim family house that a death is happening in, and we're having to cope with it. Then, like, the fallout of that plays out, and it felt Joe just did really well, both in the writing of it and in the filming of it, in sustaining the reality of that throughout. Because I think in a short film that's difficult to do. One of the things you get the luxury of doing in a long film, like I saw the other day, I saw How to Have Sex, and it's really good. But you've got a lot of time to believe in those characters, right? In a 90-minute, 100-minute film. And so you can see them doing lots of partying in wherever it is they're partying. And by the time the stuff happens, you completely believe them. You don't have that time in a short film. You've got to do it really economically. And I think he does do that really well.
And I think the thing it captures brilliantly is this sort of the British awkwardness, and I guess because we're seeing it through the lens of someone who's not British, through this exchange student, you're kind of highlighting it even more. And even the fact that they've gone to see, this guy on his deathbed, and it's tea and it's some prawns, and it's why would you, the elephant in the room is there, of why you're not just addressing what the point of being there right away. But there's so true about that, about our culture.
Well, it's very British. I mean, actually, there's a moment sorry, it's a bit of a name drop, but I was speaking to Richard Curtis about this quite recently, about how in Four Weddings and a Funeral, I think it's very beautiful that a film that is essentially about a man who can't express his emotions, he can't say how much he loves someone, is forced at the end of the film by his deaf and dumb brother, who can't speak, but who can speak, to say the words that he's supposed to say, right? I think that's actually very kind of high art at the end of that film. And without giving away the plot of Gorka, there's an element of that in Gorka as well. There's an element of things that haven't been said being said by the person who can't speak the language, who can't articulate like the others can. And that's one of the reasons it's moving. One of the reasons it's moving is that eventually you get to the point of the words that should have been said a long time ago being said from an unlikely source.
And there are these really sort of darkly comedic moments and lines. Did you have a favorite bit, or when you watch it?
As I say, I don't want to do any spoilers, but hey, Joe has already said this, I think, in an interview that he did. I think what he said is he called it the poo line. But in fact, it's when I get back in the car after her dad has died, and in fact, unbeknownst to everyone, Gorka has been to the toilet in the same room that the father had died in, and the dad, Morris, my character, very insensitively just turns to her and says, "Oh, poor bloke must have shat himself." And I just found that hilarious, totally hilarious. And then she goes crazy, fair enough, in response at the insensitivity of her husband, but it really made me laugh. So yeah, that line, I'm afraid that was the line. I'd love it if it was something more lyrical, but Morris doesn't have much lyricism in this film. Lyricism comes elsewhere. Morris is sort of the villain. He's not the villain, really, but he's a sort of grumpy, old, unemotional. He reminds me a little bit of my own dad and that's probably what I based it on, although I know, as it happens, that it's a tiny bit based on Joe Whelan's dad, Paul, who is also a film director. But I based it more on my own dad, who was, great in loads of respects, but was not his emotional articulacy wasn't his strong point. And so, yeah, that's probably where Morris came from for me.
And I guess in terms of, already mentioned quite a few of the themes that arise from it, which again is so incredible considering, it's such a short time with the characters. But, there's so much in there to unpack about, what it is about our culture that makes us a certain way. But then sometimes amazingly, a bit of humor does help you navigate these.
I think that's something about the film which I also really liked. I mean, I sort of said that already, but I think it's important. I went and saw, I think Biffa had a screening of lots of short films that I went to that Gorka was in. And actually, they were all really good, but only Gorka and one other was funny. The rest of them were pretty serious and about very sort of obviously serious subjects. Actually, Gorka is about a serious subject. It's about death and family tension, whatever, but it does it in a very funny way. It's very much a tragedy comedy, and that's something I really like about it, because people are a bit frightened of comedy these days and think that everything's got to be, very on the nose if it's an important subject. And I think it's very beautifully done in Gorka, actually, kind of with a light touch. And I don't want to give away everything that happens, but there are some very emotional scenes, and yet the whole thing still feels sunny and sort of like this. We were very lucky actually with the weather, because it was filmed in Bognor. It was in the summer, but it's Bognor, and you wouldn't expect it to be at all sunny, but it was very sunny, and that I think helps it overall, because it feels like, oh, it's quite dark, but outside it's light, and that helps with the tragicomic feel of the whole thing.
And do you feel that we've gotten to a bit of a strange place now with comedy, whether that's, film, TV, stand up, there's a whole host of things you can be talking about that. But people do say in this modern era, it's like people are just a bit afraid, and everything does seem to have lost its nuance or irony or anything like that. And obviously, it's something you've been working on for such a long time. Do you find our era is a bit difficult in that sense?
Times have changed from when I first started doing comedy in all sorts of positive ways as well. But yeah, it's people are much more policing of it. But I actually think specifically in film, actually, because like not very long ago, there was like loads and loads of film comedies, right? There was things like The Hangover or whatever, or Horrible Bodies, all those kind of big American gross out films, right? And they made a fortune. Now those films just aren't made anymore. And I think they're not made anymore because there's a sense in which, oh, maybe they were just too offensive. And some of them probably were offensive, but I don't know if you should throw out the baby with the bathwater there. That's a whole film genre that isn't made anymore. I mean, what was the last time you saw a big comedy in the cinema that feels like, oh, yeah, this is a big, important statement from this genre? I can't think of one in the last few years, really. So I think that fear of offending, yeah. I mean, I think in film, particularly because film's such a big economic investment, right? So I think you will still definitely see it in stand up, and you still see it on TV and whatever. But I think people are frightened that they might spend, 50 million on a film, and then in the first week there's an online campaign, it gets taken down.
And what does it mean to see that it's been nominated for a BAFTA? I guess obviously the results coming Sunday must be very exciting.
Well, it's quite exciting. Joe is going, hasn't invited me. So I said, I'm your plus one if you want it, but no sign of that. So it's sort of me coming up to get the BAFTA. But it is exciting. I'm actually, because my wife is Morwenna Banks, who is a writer and a very, really good actor. And she's always been, no, this is unfair. I was going to say she's always been a bit piss taking about me as an actor, and I don't think of myself really as an actor. I'm a writer and comedian, and I can only act in one way, which is essentially Morris, essentially a version of me. But I'm pretty good at that. I'm pretty good at doing versions of me, and so I told her I was going to do this short film, and she was a little bit like, "Oh right," a little bit. I felt a raised eyebrow from a proper actress, proper performer. And then I said, "Oh, it's got nominated for a BAFTA." And she's like, "Really?" And then next thing I knew, it's on the short list, and it might win. And so I'm definitely going to be driving home. This means I am an actor. I knew I could do it even late in the day. So I'm quite excited, yeah. And I think it does. I don't know. I mean, I haven't watched all the others. I should have done because I'm a member of BAFTA. But give me, cut me some slack here. I'm going to vote for Gorka. But I think if it wins, it'll be a worthy winner. So that'll be great.
And just very quickly, do you know what you're going to be working on next? I know you're always writing, doing comedy.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm doing. At the end of March, I'm recording 3 shows, which are my 3 stand-up shows that I did in the last 10 years. What they're called: Fame, Not the Musical, My Family, Not the Sitcom, and Trolls, Not the Dolls. And they're 3 one-man shows that I toured or did in the West End. And I'm now recording all 3 of them at the Royal Court at the end of March for Sky Arts. I think there's a few tickets left if anyone wants to come and see me record those at the Royal Court. I'm doing that, and I'm writing a new kids book. I'm writing a memoir. And I'm writing a musical of my first children's book. So yeah, loads of things.
Wow. Well, definitely keeping you out of trouble. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me, and best of luck for Sunday for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All the best.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.